Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lital Shemesh. Coming up in today's newscast. Israel's coalition government has dodged new elections as the Ra'am party decided to stay in parliament. Backlash after a Palestinian Al Jazeera journalist shot dead in Judea and Samaria. And the fashion industry is the second largest polluter in the world. Israeli climate tech companies are trying to combat this pollution. Ra'am, a party member of Israel's ruling coalition, has decided to stay in parliament despite the will of the opposition to break it down and call for new elections. The Ra'am party said it seeks to avoid fifth elections. To talk about the future of what seems to be a shaky ground for the Israeli government, political analyst Gil Hoffman, hello, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Happy to join you from here in the Knesset.
So Ra'am decided to stay in the coalition for now, but looking at the recent events and tensions, I'm not sure it will last for long. We knew this was coming after those long discussions by the Shura Council.
Right now, Prime Minister Bennett has gained some, at least temporary political quiet by reaching understandings with the Ra'am party. We still don't know beyond allocations to the Arab sector what this involves, whether there are any concessions regarding the Temple Mount as were demanded. It could very well be that they'll find another reason to start fighting in another matter of days or weeks.
And what does this mean for the future of the coalition? We do see the Yamina party struggling for its existence.
Well, the coalition remains 60 to 59, which is a very fragile majority. Idit Silman cannot vote against the government, or she would be declared a defector the way Amichai Shikli was. So as long as she's neutralized, they have that majority of one. But you've got a member of Knesset who's pregnant, who can't be replaced, and it's complicated. It's not going to be easy. They have only another 10 and a half weeks until the next Knesset vacation in August. But every bill, there's 42 bills being brought to a vote today. Every bill is a challenge.
Yeah, so Gil, if you had to estimate a time frame, is it a matter of weeks or months for the government to dissolve?
Months. I mean, they can make it through these 10 weeks. And then there's a long break. It's all of August, September, and most of October. And then already, by the time they initiate elections, it's November. The election would be in February. In 2023, there was going to be a change of power in August 2023 anyway. Nobody will remember the difference between February and August.
And if we're looking at the recent polls, we can see that alongside Yamina, Tikva Hadasha is also collapsing.
Well, parties have to prove that they accomplished something. Yamina has to pass right-wing measures, and Tikva Hadasha, the New Hope party, has to pass its proposal to limit terms for a prime minister, or they haven't accomplished anything here. And that's even more stark, I think, with the Ra'am party, because they're implementing new policies and allocations that have never been made for the Arab sector before. And the average Arab citizen needs to feel it, needs to see it with his own eyes. And it takes time. So the longer this government lasts, the better it is for not only Ra'am, but for the whole concept of there being an Arab party in the coalition ever again.
And getting back to the Arab party in the coalition, to Ra'am, called Abu Akla, the Palestinian journalist killed today, a murder. They called for an international commission to investigate the circumstances of her death. How do you explain them staying in the coalition at the moment?
They're staying in the coalition to help the average Arab citizen with housing and fighting crime and education and bridging the gaps between Jews and Arabs in this country. That's why they exist. They're not here to decide who's a martyr and who's not, and deal with the Temple Mount or the Palestinian issue at all. And I think that when they did, it kind of harmed them. It made them get to the brink of having to leave and lose all that money. So they played lip service as they had to do. There's a rival joint list party, so they called her a martyr. That was enough for now. They're not going to be fighting the government, I think, again anytime soon after they can declare victory over what they got today.
Political analyst Gil Hoffman, thank you for this interview. An Al Jazeera journalist has been shot dead while reporting on crossfires between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants in the city of Jenin. Another journalist was injured. More in the following report.
This was the scene in the city of Jenin in Judea and Samaria this morning after a journalist was shot dead. The Palestinian Health Ministry says Shireen Abu Akleh, aged 51, was shot in the head. She was a senior veteran journalist for Qatar's Al Jazeera news organisation. The Al Jazeera TV network called Abu Akleh one of the first generation of the channel's field correspondents. Videos shared on social media show Abu Akleh being put in a car and transferred to a medical facility. The incident took place during an Israeli raid on terrorist groups in the city. The hotspot has been plagued by deadly clashes in recent weeks. The Palestinian Authority says it holds Israel responsible for the killing, but Israel says initial findings show Palestinian gunmen fired the fatal bullet.
ההכפשות השקריות נגד חיילינו, א', האם הם ירו, וב', אם ירו במכוון. הכפשות שמושמעות מתוך הקואליציה מוכיחות שוב שממשלה שתלויה בתומכי טרור לא יכולה להיאבק לאורך זמן נגד הטרור.
Israel has offered a joint investigation and pathological analysis into the incident, an offer Palestinians have refused. In a statement, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said the PA is throwing baseless accusations at the Jewish state, adding, quote, "According to the details we have at the moment, there is a good chance that armed Palestinians who fired wildly are the ones who led to the unfortunate death of the journalist. The funeral for Shireen Abu Akleh, who is also a US citizen, will be held tomorrow in Jerusalem."
To tell us more and analyze this, we're joined by Daniel Seaman, media analyst and former director of the Israeli government press office. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Lita.
So what do we know about this journalist? We know that she was working for Al Jazeera for many years now.
Yeah, I know her from time when I worked at the government press office, which is about a decade ago. She is a veteran journalist. She is a veteran correspondent with Al Jazeera. I think all journalists here, though the number of foreign journalists in the state covering events here in the Middle East or in Israel particularly, have been cut down significantly in past years. Still, those who are here, especially for such a long time, understand the dangers that exist in the coverage, especially in times of tension as we have at the moment. So it's very unfortunate that this happened there. But she, as I said, as a veteran, but you never know. And it's always dangerous, and you always have to be exceptionally careful. It's unfortunate what happened there with her.
Yeah, and we're seeing two versions of what was happening on the ground at the moment. Both IDF and the Palestinian Authority is trying to check what really happened there, but it only took the Palestinians minutes to blame Israel for the shootings.
Of course, the Palestinians have a record. The Palestinian Authority has a record of accusing and pointing fingers at Israel, as do many in the media, before things are clear. I know one thing, as a former combat soldier myself, especially Israel operating in an area of dense population, they're very careful, understanding that it is very dangerous and you have to know exactly what you're doing at every moment. Therefore, if none of the soldiers there fired, as they did in their initial report, they do not fire until they see an enemy that they have to address or a threat that they have to address. The Arabs, on the other hand, in that area are very quick to pull the trigger, thinking that they see Israelis. Another thing is, the Israelis are dressed in combat uniform. The Arabs who are there are terrorists. They're trying to blend in with the civilian population in order to have the Israelis not realize who is a danger to them and who's not. As journalists are dressed up as Israelis would not be quick, meaning they're dressed up as the Israeli soldiers are, the Israelis would not be quick to pull the trigger against them. Therefore, from my understanding of this, there's more of a chance that this was done by those thugs and terrorists there who are firing from a civilian population, already a crime against humanity in itself, that they take coverage behind civilians. It's more likely that they're the ones who perpetrated this than the Israeli soldiers.
Do you think that the IDF spokesperson unit was a bit late in putting out the, the response of the IDF to the incident?
Of course, as usual, but there's always circumstances, because they're waiting to find out what actually happened before, and the report comes in. While this is happening in Jenin, the Palestinian Authority can immediately report on it. The Israelis have to get the report come back to them, to the IDF spokesman's unit. Therefore, there's always a delay with that, and they're always very careful to try to find out what happened before. The Arabs there are not held to the same standards as the IDF spokesman. Therefore, they can say whatever they want. Reported immediately. Al Jazeera did this, and they have a record of not always sticking to the truth. Also, I understand that the Palestinian Authority Health Ministry, they have a history of spreading not only lies, but blood libels against the Jewish people. In the past, they reported, there was one report by them that Israel had poisoned, ironically, had poisoned the wells there, something that was an anti-Semitic trope that was used against Jews in the past. And then there was this report for years that the foreign journalist reported and mimicked, constantly reported, was that Israel used the use of Israeli dime weapons, something that does not even exist in reality, but supposedly something that Israel used against the Arabs there. So I would not put a lot of trust in what they're saying. I'd wait till the full report comes out. But as it looks like at the moment, this was done by the Arabs themselves and had nothing to do with the Israeli soldiers there.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the propaganda war, and I have to ask you, is Israel, do we even have, a chance to winning in that propaganda war where you have all those pictures being spread out online, on social media, on television?
Well, this whole concept of false news or lies that are coming here, that are coming out of there, this was, I call Israel the cradle of fake news. Because journalists here did not apply professional standards for many years. And Israel was, to a large degree, put its trust in the journalists that they would uphold professional standards, which they did not. About 20 years ago, when the Intifada broke out, we were quick to learn that the first thing that Israel was accused of was killing this boy called Mohammed al-Dura, which later on, when you found out, it was actually done by the Palestinians themselves who fired in the direction, and it was not clear whether the child had died or not.
But the damage was already done.
The damage is always done. The damage is always done. The only thing I can say right now is that Israel and the Middle East here is not at the focus of the international interest as it was in the past, and therefore this may last for 24 hours, but the Palestinian Authority are trying to milk this for all they can. We already know that her funeral was delayed till tomorrow, so that the Palestinians, it's not for them to be able to investigate it. It's so that the Palestinian Authority can attend it and milk this for all they can to paint Israel, because in the past month and a half, what we've been seeing is Palestinian terrorism against Israeli civilians, Palestinians murdering Israeli civilians, and they're trying to divert the attention away from their activity and from their encouragement of this activity on the part of their civilians. They're trying to move it away and draw attention to Israel, supposedly as if Israel has done something wrong in this case. So any professional journalist would be very careful and take their time before pointing the finger at Israel. Now, journalists die there is, unfortunately, in areas of conflict, you have at least over 20 people who've died, for example, in the conflict going on right now between the Ukraine and Russia. So it is known that this happens. It's unfortunate, and hopefully journalists will be very cautious before they point the finger at Israel in this case.
Yeah, and it's also concerning that the Palestinian Authority is not allowing Israel to check what happened there. It makes you wonder. Daniel Seaman, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Ongoing tensions around Jerusalem's Temple Mount, with Jordan now saying Israel has no sovereignty over the holy city. Meanwhile, to Israel's northern border with Syria, an alleged Israeli missile strike the country's southwest. This accordingly to Syrian and Israeli reports. Joining me Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Middle East expert and lecturer from Bar-Ilan University. Hello.
Hi, Lital.
So we see a power struggle over control of the old city of Jerusalem led by Jordan, Turkey, and even Saudi Arabia. And where is Israel in all of that?
Well, we are watching here a two-level war on Jerusalem. The one level is Israel against all the others, means the two Islamic movements, Hamas, the PA, the Waqf, Jordan, maybe Saudi Arabia as well. Morocco also has what to say about this. And this is one level. And the second level is even much more complicated. All these parties, the Arab and Islamic parties, are actually fighting itself, one each other. Because everyone wants to have a share in this holy city in order to shed legitimacy over his custodianship to his own citizens and to Jerusalem as well. And this is actually what stands behind all these struggles, because whenever Israel takes side with one of the sides, after all, Israel is the country which brought Jordan to control the place already in 1994 in the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan, in order to pull the rag under the Palestinian custodianship, which the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, of course, claim to this place. Mm-hmm. Israel, those days, had good relations with King Hussein, and Rabin trusted him that he will not act against Israel, and he did not. However, his son, Abdullah, changed his policies of his father dramatically in many fields and in many areas, and including Jerusalem, to a degree that he actually widened the Waqf, means the committee which runs the Al-Aqsa Mosque, in order to include Palestinians in this, although Jordan was elected to be the custodian of the place in order to prevent the Palestinians from coming into this issue.
And
so
we also know, and we also know, Dr. Kedar, that King of Jordan, Abdullah, is meeting President Biden this week in the White House, and we can assume that the two will discuss the Temple Mount issue.
Not only this, the Abdullah, King of Hussein, actually advocates the establishment of a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, knowing that this state will inevitably turn into another Hamastan, either by elections or by coup d'etat. And this is what he wants. He wants to destroy Israel, but he doesn't say it clearly. He doesn't say it explicitly. But whatever he's doing is in order to undermine Israel, to undermine Israel's legitimacy. By the way, his cousin was the head of the United Nations Human Rights Committee. And this man acted time and again and again and again against Israel in the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations in Geneva by the orders of his cousin, the King Abdullah of Jordan. And this only shows how the Jordanian king is actually a vile enemy of the state of Israel, covers his face in the peace agreement which he has with Israel. Unfortunately, here in Israel, the officials do not see it. And they try to turn their eyes in order not to see the reality about the King of Jordan. And they don't tell him what they think about him because they don't think.
So when the King of Jordan is saying the road to peace goes through Jerusalem, what should we understand from that?
That he sees himself as the owner of Jerusalem, as the one who has sovereignty of Jerusalem. And we should tell everybody, the near and the far, that Israel is the sovereign of Jerusalem entirely, and all the parts of Jerusalem. And if some people want to pray in Al-Aqsa, they are more than welcome. But Israel is the custodian.
Yes, and Ra'am chairman again shocked the coalition this week while announcing his position on the Temple Mount state King Jordan.
The Ra'am party is another kind of a game which the Muslim Brotherhood are playing with Israel. They appear to be, Knesset members and, they want to live with Israel. And this is a lie. They want to destroy Israel by taking Jerusalem out from Israel and handing it to Muslims. The Islamic movement in Israel, in both parts, the northern and the southern, the northern which is out from the Knesset and the southern which is now we see Mansour Abbas, they all think that Israel has no right to exist.
Dr. Mordechai Kedar, thank you so much for this interview.
You're welcome.
Now, if you're enjoying ILTV, make sure to check out our extended list of content on ILTV Plus, including weekly episodes of Unicorn Nation. This week, we're looking at how tech has changed the way we shop. Sooner or later, will we even need to leave the house at all? We can just do everything through online apps, even trying on those pair of jeans you've been wanting to buy. All the answers in today's episode. Staying on the same topic, it's known that the fashion industry is the second largest polluter in the world. Now, Israeli climate tech companies are taking part in a competition to try and change that. Asaf Nissan with a report.
Fashion, one of the most glamorous and profitable industries in the world, from Gucci and Prada all the way to Mango and Zara. But did you know that about 30% of the clothes in the West go to garbage landfills? And do you know how much pollution and damage to the environment this industry creates?
So the fashion industry is one of the top polluting industries in the world today. Actually, almost up to 25% of water pollution globally is attributed to the fashion and apparel and textile industry.
The fashion industry is considered to be the second biggest pollutant industry in the world. Its main effects on the environment are the release of high amounts of pollutants into the air as a result of high consumption of water and 1,000 different chemicals in the purpose to whiten and color the fabrics. As Startup Nation Central has decided to take it on itself as purpose to promote the Israeli innovation around the world as part of its green agenda and struggle against the climate crisis.
There are today more than 750 Israeli startups and tech-driven companies that have solutions that are relevant to address climate change, from reducing greenhouse gas emissions through transportation, energy, construction, materials, circularity, and much more.
One of their means to promote this agenda is the Startup Nation Central CSP competition together with Kakal and JNF Canada. As part of the events of the competition, there are 6 challenges, with one of them being the Sustainable Fashion Tech Revolutionary Challenge, sponsored by the Kornit Company.
Our technology drives the revolution of making the fashion industry into on-demand and sustainable industry. The way we do it is we actually transform the way fashion is being done today, and instead of trying to sell what is already being made, what we're doing is we're actually making and manufacturing on-demand sustainably what was already sold.
In this challenge, Israeli climate tech companies are competing to find green and innovative solutions to the pollution done by the fashion industry.
Startup Nation Central envisions climate tech as the next cybersecurity field for Israel, a field that is identified with Israel, where Israeli companies are market leaders and Israelis are thought leaders, a field that has a whole ecosystem around it that is nurturing its activities.
So the change is already here, and the future of the fashion industry seems brighter with the Israeli innovation. And what we, as consumers, can do: consume less, buy secondhand, and be more aware of the pollution behind one of the most glamorous but also most polluting industries in the world.
Israeli innovation, amazing. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies expected around the country tonight, with the same expected tomorrow. Then lows this evening ranging from 11 to 17 degrees Celsius or 53 to 62 Fahrenheit. And tomorrow sees top temperature reaching 22 to 28 degrees Celsius or 70 to 80 Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel and around the world, check out our website, ILTV.tv. You can also subscribe to our newsletter and join us on our streaming platform at ILTV Plus. You can catch that across all your devices. I'm Lital Shemesh. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.
Stay informed with the latest Israel news, live programs, culture, kosher cooking, and more on ILTV Plus. Subscribe on any device now and get a free month trial. Go to www.iltv.tv, add ILTV Plus on Roku, or download ILTV Plus from the Apple or Android app stores.